Here's what's coming up on this week's Face the State. It's a push to expand funding at one major school district.
This is how public education is funded in our state, and that is why we have to come back to our voters.
And we speak with Columbus City School Superintendent and the board president about where this funding will all go. Plus, hundreds in Central Ohio showing support for the thousands of victims of war in the Israel-Hamas conflict, why one father is flying overseas to the Middle East. This week of Face the State begins with the countdown to the November election. In just over 2 weeks, hundreds of thousands of voters will be heading to the polls to vote on major state issues, local funding, and the next local leaders of our community. Thanks for joining us this Sunday morning. I'm Clay Gordon, filling in for Face the State host Doug Petcash. This week, we are focusing on preparing you for the November election. Now, one of the issues many of you will be voting on deals with Ohio's largest school district, a levy with Columbus City Schools. It's an issue 10 TV has been covering for months, but where exactly would this funding be used? To answer those questions, Superintendent Dr. Angela Chapman and Board President Jennifer Adair join me now in studio. First, thank you for being with me this morning. A couple of important questions here to start with. President Adair, let's start with you. How much funding is actually at stake right now, and how did the district arrive on this dollar amount?
Right, so we are asking our voters right now for, it's a 7.7 mil levy. And that is, we have an operating piece and we have a permanent improvement piece for that. And so total, it is close to $100 million that we are going to be asking our voters for. And again, that's a piece for operating and a piece for our buildings.
It's been a month since the board came to a resolution on achievement and the facilities, the maintenance for the facilities. Tell me a little bit more about that resolution.
How we arrived at placing the permanent improvement piece on, really, there's no secret that our buildings and our building conditions have been deteriorating over a long time. And the way that our district has been set up financially is that we have not had dedicated funding stream into our capital budget or permanent improvement fund. The way we've been doing that over time are basically one hit. So we might all remember Operation Fix It. That was a one-time ask we came to the community for that is all done. And we also have pieces where we move money from our operating budget into this permanent improvement fund. That's how we fixed the West High School track. So that is not the best fiscally responsible way that we can govern. And so our board unanimously voted to ask our voters to establish a dedicated funding source so we could ensure that our buildings are maintained, repaired, and we have replacement to ensure that our standards are kept up and we can make improvements to the learning spaces for our students, which we know improves student outcomes.
So Dr. Chapman, tell me about which facilities and why those facilities were selected if this funding goes through. Why did we come on some of those buildings?
So we want to remind everyone that certainly if we have an increase in our revenue that supports our permanent improvement fund, and we're not building new buildings, this will give us an opportunity to invest in our fixed assets. As President Adair mentioned, some of that includes our athletic spaces, so stadiums, tracks, making sure that we maintain them, they're safe, they're accessible for our students to compete on. It also includes making the necessary investments in our learning environments, which include upgrading the furniture in our classrooms, upgrading the playgrounds, upgrading cafeteria furniture. So when our students are coming to school every day, they have access and can use furniture that has been updated and resources that have been updated that certainly supports a warm and welcoming learning environment. It also includes more of our fixed assets where we think about making investments to make sure our roofs are maintained. HVAC. This was the first school year that we started when that allowed all of our classrooms to have air conditioning in every classroom. And so we've made those big investments for all of our learning spaces. Now we need to maintain them. We need to make sure that they're being maintained, we're checking on them, we're monitoring them so that they can operate at full capacity. And so those are some of the investments that we would be able to make if we have a continuous revenue stream to support our permanent improvement resources.
On the educational side of this, what does that mean for staff and students?
So that's the operating side of the budget. And so if we have an increase in funding that supports our operating fund, we will have an opportunity to maintain several key positions across the district. We think of them as our mental health supports, school counselors, school social workers. Prior to the pandemic, we had school counselors were maybe assigned to a building 1 day a week, which we know does not meet the full needs of our students or our families for that matter. And so with this investment, we will have an opportunity to maintain full staffing levels where we have a full-time counselor at every building across the district. We'll be able to maintain our social worker positions, attendance specialists, school safety staff, custodians. It will really give us an opportunity to make sure we have the necessary human capital on board to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students and our families.
So if this levy fails, what does this mean for, as you say, the human capital? What does this mean for the staffing at CCS?
So Clay, on our general operating fund, 84% of our operating budget supports staffing. So if we do not see an increase in revenue for our general operating fund, it will require us to make some significant cuts to staffing. And so all of the positions that we were able to stand up during the pandemic, post-pandemic, using our ESSER funding, all of those positions will be reduced or eliminated. We'll also not be able to bring back and make sure that we maintain the adequate staffing levels to ensure that every school has a school counselor every day a week. Students don't get to decide when they're having a mental health crisis. They don't plan that out. I'm going to be, in a vulnerable space on a Monday when the counselor is there. Students bring their full selves to school every day, and we need to make sure that we have all of the full complement of mental health resources available to support our students every day of the week. In addition, we want to expand early childhood access across the district. And so if we're not able to have an increase in revenue, we will not be able to expand early childhood programming. Our intent was to add 6 pre-K classrooms across the district. And I would certainly say, across the district, we offer pre-K programming at 62 of our sites, and all of those pre-K programs are 4 or 5-star rated, which is excellent work speaks excellence about the work that our educators are doing in the early childhood space, and we'd certainly like to be able to offer more services and programming to our families.
So if this is pushed through, how soon will Columbus City Schools see some of these programs, see these staffing improvements? How fast will that happen?
It will, all of the changes will take place for the following school year. So the ballot initiative is just in a couple of weeks. We'll be working on the planning for making these transitions, but we'll be notifying staff certainly sooner than that. Typically when we look at changes in staffing levels, we go through a process in January and February called Article 211. Some of the language that we use for making transitions for staffing is articulated in our collective bargaining agreements, and so there are set timelines for when we have to notify staff if positions are going to be added or positions are going to be removed. But all of the changes will be in effect for the following school year.
Clay, can I jump in for a second? I just want to make it clear that this ask to our community, this reinvestment that we're asking our community to make, is really about stabilizing the district so that we can have a strong foundation to build on. So we are talking about regular operating money. This is a cycle that we come to voters typically every 4 years. We're actually 7 years out, so we're longer in our cycle. And then again, having this permanent source of funding for capital needs. All of this builds that foundation so that we can push our district forward and ensure that we have the vision that our community wants for our schools. And that's something that we're excited that Dr. Chapman's leadership will bring. Mm-hmm. But just making it clear that this is a reinvestment in what we have now. So one of the things we're excited about is the addition of pre-K, but that's actually one of the only few additions that we are making. This is really about stabilizing. And before we even got to this point, just making it really clear that Dr. Chapman's first day on the job as our interim superintendent, the board asked her to cut to get us to this point, to go through an exercise to cut a substantial amount of money out of the non-personnel budget so that we could demonstrate that we are being financially responsible. And so before even coming to the voters, we went through this exercise. So this is foundational. This is to ensure that our children, have the things they need in their learning environments so that they can improve, like on the state report card, so that they can become Portrait of a Graduate students, and so that they can do all the things that we want them to do.
Now, President Adair, the Columbus chapter of the NAACP is not a fan of this levy. They think it's going to hurt citizens more than it will help. So I know in the past you guys have held off on coming forward with this. Is this the critical time to put this on the ballot?
Yeah, it is a critical time. Like I mentioned earlier, we are 7 years, and typically it's a 4-year cycle. So this is unfortunately the way that school is funded in Ohio. All public schools must come to their voters, and we must ask for property tax. And so really, and it's been found unconstitutional, right? So really, the problems about how schools are funded here are a lot bigger than CCS, and this is really a thing that we as an entire state need to address. It's hard, right? These decisions are not easy, but my job as the elected official is to ensure that our schools are funded so that we can educate our children. Public education in Ohio is essential to develop the next group of citizens that are going to be taking the reins in all types of professions, jobs, and leadership. And that's my job. That's what I've been elected to do. And so our board unanimously voted to put this on, and we believe that this is the right time. We're going on the expert advice of our finance and our academic program to understand what we need right now to push us towards the future.
So we have a few weeks left until Election Day. We will have to leave it there. President Adair, Dr. Chapman, thank you for joining us today on Face the State.
Thank you.
Coming up next, the way Columbus City Council operates is about to undergo a big change.
I think the biggest thing is that you will have someone who's living in your neighborhood, someone who is acutely aware of your issues. The districts provide a representative that lives within your district that's going to represent you, but you still have access to all 9 members. So I think that's kind of the biggest change.
What voters need to know on the district change next. Welcome back. Columbus City Council going through a big change. In 2018, voters decided to switch from a fully at-large system to a hybrid at-large system. Well, under it, council members have to live in the district they actually represent. But voters will actually see all 9 districts on their ballots and will vote for each and every one of those seats. The November 7th election is the first time voters will choose council members under this new system. Face the State moderator Doug Petcash talked with Columbus City Council's in-house counsel, Naya Walters, about how it all works and how it came about.
So Naya, a big question is, how will things be different now?
I think the biggest thing is that you will have someone who's living in your neighborhood, someone who is acutely aware of your issues. The districts provide a representative that lives within your district that's going to represent you, but you still have access to all 9 members. So I think that's kind of the biggest change. In addition to that, on your ballot, you will see up to 18 candidates on your general election ballot. So some you'll see 2 people, some you will see 1, but each person will be voted on by each member of our community. And so that's really exciting because you get that specific attention, but you also still have a council who is still responsible to the whole entire electorate.
So if someone lives in District 3, they're still going to see all 9 districts on their ballot and get to select the council member from each of those districts that they like.
That's correct.
So how did this all come about?
So in 2018, issue 3 was placed on the ballot, and voters voted overwhelmingly in favor of this issue by 76.06%. So that is a good chunk of the city voters that voted in favor of this. But that was to add 2 additional seats to council and to create 9 residential districts. Again, the key piece was creating that neighborhood representation across the city. So from that, we set an independent citizen-led commission who worked tirelessly, going to community meetings, setting up community meetings, and drawing the maps, trying to really figure out, like, what do our neighbors think is their neighborhood, and what does that look like for them? So we asked all those questions, and then we got hard to work at drafting those maps. And so we had several different map releases, 3 specifically, and then essentially after that, the commissioners chose 3 maps to submit to council, and then council took that and they chose a map. And so now we have a map.
And so when people see the maps, which is on the website for
Yes.
City Council, some of the districts may look bigger than others, but it wasn't based on geographic size, right?
That's correct. It's based on population. So the charter prescribes that the largest district cannot be larger than the smallest district by more than 1%. So each district is roughly 100,638 people. I think it's also important to note that this process will happen every 10 years. So even if people continue to move into these districts, you won't see a change in the map until that 10-year process, which is kind of in line with the census, similar to what you see at the state and federal level.
And so the vote will be for the first time on November 7th, officially, when this will be official.
Yeah.
But when does it actually go into effect?
So it'll go into effect on the January 1st of 2024. So that is when the official effect will be there. And you will see at the first council meeting that council members will draw lots because this is a full reset of council. So we are going to have to stagger the terms for those members once they come in. And so you will see 5 council members that will get a 4-year term, and then you will see 4 council members that will get a 2-year term based off the charter requirements.
And is that so that there is some overlap and that there's not, every election wouldn't be filling the entire council?
Right. So it creates that continuity. It also staggers those terms so that we have people that are consistently rotating the way that council elections currently operate.
And I guess, it's also the big change, too, is that you're adding 2 council members.
Yes.
How important is that in your opinion?
I think it just creates a better representation. Columbus is a growing city. We're expected to have 1 million additional people here by 2050. And so we need additional people to represent us as our city continues to grow. So I think this will help with our representation. And again, they have to live in that district. I mean, even in order to get on the ballot for these districts, they have to get 250 signatures within that district to get on the ballot. So creating our neighborhood representation and making sure that neighborhoods have a voice in choosing who can get on the ballot for their district.
And what was the sentiment back in 2018 or before that was building up to why this change needed to be made?
So I wasn't here in 2018 when they made the decision, but from what I have garnered, there was a push from the community to have districts. That proposal went on the ballot, but it failed. And so they came back with a hybrid system. And the hybrid system, voters voted overwhelmingly in favor of. So I think voters in this community really wanted some form of district, but they weren't necessarily 100% sold on having a true ward system. So that's how we got this hybrid system, which allows them to kind of have the best of both worlds. You have someone in your neighborhood who represents your district, but you still have access to the entire council. And so that will help as we think about our committee structure and has things kind of move forward with the council.
And you mentioned the true ward system.
Yes.
And would that be that whoever represents a district is only voted on by people in the district, and that's the big difference between with the hybrid?
Yes.
And so, if somebody wants more information about where they live, who would be in their district, how would they find that information today?
So currently we only have candidates, so we don't have anyone that is currently representing a district because districts didn't exist before. But if they want more information to figure out what district they live in, columbus.gov/districts will provide more information. So you can type in your address and it'll provide you more information about your district and all of those things. In terms of the campaign and knowing who's running in your district, all that information can probably be found at your Franklin County Board of Elections.
Nia Walters, thank you so much for your time and explaining this brand new system for first time in more than a century.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm so excited to see how this changed representation for our residents. I think just having someone in your neighborhood is going to be extremely helpful in kind of getting that neighborhood specific issue solved when you have a direct person you can go to.
Face the State moderator Doug Petcash there. Next, coming up on Face the State, hundreds in Central Ohio showing support for the thousands of victims of war in the Israel-Hamas conflict, while one father is flying overseas to fight on the front lines.
ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله.
Well, this week, several organizations came together to support both Israel and Palestine in the fight against terrorism. Ohio State University students held a prayer vigil. It's just one local sign of support for the Middle East this week. Palestinian Americans also filled up Columbus City Council chambers Monday night. They're asking council members to show their support for the people in Gaza. But as 10 TV's Andrew Kinsey shows us, that moment quickly turned heated and emotional.
This behind me is the community you serve. They are not simply numbers. They are not simply statistics. They are people.
Frustrations boil over inside Columbus City Council. Dozens of Palestinians showed up, some having to wait outside in the rain, calling for council to condemn Israel's attacks on innocent civilians.
We come here today to plead, to all but beg for this council to condemn Israeli forces and to stand against in a public declaration of the genocide that is currently happening in Gaza.
But when council attempted to speak, protesters interrupted in anger.
I don't have the solutions tonight.
How many Palestinians have to die?
Okay.
How many?
Council had to go into recess twice to restore order, but in the end, Councilmember Shayla Favor gave the strongest opinion on the situation of any council member.
I will stand firm in my support for my Palestinian sisters and brothers, and I'm going to stand firm for my support for my Israeli brothers and sisters as well, unapologetically.
For 10 TV News, I'm Andrew Kinsey.
Columbus Council President Shannon Hardin says a meeting will be scheduled to further discuss this issue.
All we want is to bring these people home safe and to make sure that our kids that are over there trying to do this difficult, dangerous work have everything that they could need in order to do their job to the best of their ability and come home safely soon.
Also happening now, a major effort is underway to provide extra resources to members of the Columbus community who've been called back to serve in the Israel Defense Forces. And TV's Carly Dion explaining more on this effort. Carly.
Let's do the boxes first.
Normally, when a home is filled with stuffed boxes and bags, you might think a family is preparing for a move. But the Buren household is preparing for a mission.
Being here so far away from the conflict made me feel almost useless.
Jeff and Megan say they felt compelled to go beyond donating money to help Columbus residents called back to Israel to serve in its defense forces. Jeff deciding the only way to help is to go.
I feel like it's my job to show up and lend a hand.
When the community caught wind of this effort, they joined in. Just yesterday, dozens of neighbors and friends got together in their home, bringing supplies and packing bags for Jeff's trip. And today, the support kept coming with frequent drop-offs of supplies.
We actually have close friends and community members whose sons and daughters are serving in the Army or have been called up to serve in the Army. And so these things will go directly to the people that need them.
While Megan works out the logistics of the trip and coordinating volunteers along the way, Jeff will head to Miami tonight in a loaded U-Haul, where he will then fly to Israel with all of the supplies.
There is a little bit of fear sort of deep down. I mean, right now I'm very far away from it, but there is no hesitancy.
The father of 3 says while some loved ones are concerned for his safety as he heads into a war zone, he has also received a lot of support for his decision to go.
To see the damage and destruction and to know what the further fallout will be for people on both sides of the border is disheartening.
Jeff says having to watch this catastrophe unfold has been unbearable.
It's because those missiles are falling, frankly, that I feel like I'm going.
Carly Dion reporting. Now, Jeff and Megan say if you'd like to support this effort, you could do so by supporting the organization Jewish Columbus. Well, thank you for joining me for Face the State this week. I'm Clay Gordon. Doug Petcash will be back next week, Sunday at 11:30.